Okay, we're going to start today with something a little bit subtle, and that is what is the difference between sine inverse and then sometimes you'll see sine inverse written as this other thing called arcsine. For all practical purposes, this is just two ways of writing exactly the same thing. All right, sine to the -1 and arcsine can be treated exactly the same by us. The subtle difference here is that arcsine is something that has infinitely many answers to it, where sine inverse is the thing in our calculator that gives us one right answer. But the way that we functionally use both of these things, these two things mean the same thing. So if you see arcsine, it means sine inverse. Arctan means tan inverse. Treat them as exactly the same when you're doing all of your problems because that subtlety of the number of answers really doesn't matter much as we're doing actual problems. We're going to now look at what is going on with using our calculators to do these problems. You can use your calculator to find a sine, cosine, tangent, inverse of a problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the Desmos calculator today, but it'll work the same way in your handheld calculators. Just know that sine inverse is usually the shift or the second of sine, and cosine inverse is the shift or the second of cosine, etc. So we want to use the Desmos scientific calculator to find the sine inverse of -0.6. Remember, this answer should come out in quadrant 4 and should be a negative number of degrees. We're going to get our answers in degrees when we're using our calculator. So here is the sine inverse button. It is the one with the -1 on it, and we're going to put in sine inverse of -0.6 and close the parentheses. And you can see it is -36.8699 degrees. So -36.8699 degrees. If we wanted to do this in radians, we could. We would just have to switch over to radian mode, and there is the answer in radians. So we can do this either direction. Let's try cosine inverse of zero point 0.4. So we go over to our function button, cosine inverse, back to main, 0.4. Close the parentheses, and we can see that is 66.4218 degrees. Tangent inverse of -5. Now, stop for a minute. Let's remember, what can we plug in for sine and cosine inverse? Remember, the domain of these two is from -1 to 1. So any number bigger or smaller than -1 to 1 shouldn't be plugged into this. But we can plug a number bigger than or smaller than -1 or 1 when we're plugging it into a tangent. So let's use our calculator and let's go to function. We're going to do the tangent inverse of -5, and we get -78.6901 degrees. Now, remember, arcsine is the same as sine inverse. So what would the sine inverse of 3 be? So let's see if we can find the sine inverse of 3 using our calculator. So over to function, sine inverse, go back to main, we'll plug in a 3 and hit close. What is our answer that's coming out here? Undefined. Why is it undefined? Well, remember what we just said? You can only plug in numbers between -1 and 1 into sine and cosine inverse. So what is this one? It doesn't exist. It's undefined. Similarly, I know right off the bat, -2 is not between -1 and 1, so I don't even need my calculator for this one to know that the answer here does not exist.